We are Judith Freixa and Pedro Bueno from Universitat Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, and we will be talking about lexicographic detection and representation of Spanish neologisms in the COVID-19 pandemic. So in this work, we will try to set the boundaries on the continuum along which pandemic neologisms fall. At both ends of this continuum, there are some very surprising non-words, as well as some neologisms that have recently lost their status as such because they have now been incorporated into the dictionary. In order to identify different groups along the continuum of pandemic neologisms, we will take into account the criteria proposed in the current literature, and by so doing, we will be able to assess the extent to which they are discriminatory. And this will allow us to address the neological process and to reflect on the various stages of it, from the time a neologism is born to the moment it ceases to be one because it has been dictionarized. So, now, in the most neology literature in Spanish, a neologism is considered to be a new word, either formally or semantically new, or taken from another language. However, we will use the following definition of a neologism: a recent word that is in the process of becoming established in a language. A recent word is therefore not a neologism unless there is also an intention for it to enter in common use by speakers. In this case, the words that we will consider recent are the following. On the one side, the words, thematic words related to the COVID-19 pandemic that first appeared between January 2020 and June 2021, and also those that have appeared earlier but have experienced a big increase in use during the pandemic. So novelty is the main characteristic of neologisms, and since novelty is a perceptively subjective quality, a methodological criterion must be established in order to obtain data in an objective way. This criterion will necessarily be separate from the theoretical understanding of neologism. Moreover, it will always be an unsatisfactory one because we will be trying to square the circle. Assuming this limitation, the most reliable criterion for the detection of neologism will be the comparison of analysis texts necessarily current. These texts are the ones from which neologisms are expected to be extracted, with an exclusion corpus that must be a corpus capable of being deemed representative of the language. However, most neology observatories around the world do not have such an ideal corpus of the kind of the equipment to exploit it. So an exclusion corpus usually employs a lexicographic corpus composed of one or more dictionaries of reference dictionaries. In the case of Spanish neology observatories, this method is used, and every unit from the analysis text not found in the exclusion corpus formed by the RAE or other references dictionaries are detected as neologisms. But as with this criteria, we detect on the one side neologisms, but also some kind of units that we call pseudo-neologisms, such as morphologically irregular and semantically transparent non-new words, specialized lexical units, institutionalized colloquialisms, localisms, or occasionalisms, also the non-words. But people that are working with these criteria, neologist observatories, are led by linguists who are aware of these shortcomings of this criteria, and that's why we can detect the neologisms and the pseudo-neologisms with this criteria. How do we detect them? Well, we have on the one side the automatic detection that is carried out using information technology tools. In the Barcelona Observatory and Spanish observatories, we use Buscaneo, which is an automatic detector of neology. Used in newspapers, magazines, and Twitter, but also we have a manual detection using oral text and also in written text to detect semantic, syntactic neologisms, and also compounds unit because they already belong to the dictionary. They already are registered in the dictionary, and that's why we need the manual hand, to detect all of these units. Beyond the discussion about which words are neologicals, pseudo-neologicals, are not neologicals, we believe that from a lexicographic perspective, it is more interesting to try to explain the neological process, a process that begins when a word is born as a neological one, till it becomes a unit that is sufficiently well established in social use to be included in a general dictionary. Because neologisms at a more advanced stage of the neological process should be the first to be included in dictionaries. This point of view, or this dynamic, complex vision of the neological process is initiated in the debate proposed by Bauer, that he proposed the three stages of nouns-word, followed by institutionalization and finished with the lexicalization, also by Hohenhaus. But Schmidt said in 2008 that the processes happens at the same time. And he called it like creation, consolidation, and establishment. And based on these proposals, and also in the proposal by Kirremans, Freixa tried to identify different neological behaviors. Of course, we have the nouns word as the first stage of a word, the first occurrence of a word, and the occasionalism stage. If it stopped at this first occurrence, we will be talking about pure occasionalism. So occasionalism is instead of new words. But also, we can find ephemeral neologisms. Ephemeral neologisms are units that manage to acquire certain frequency of use, and then they start the process, but at one point of the process, they stop. And also, we can be talking about, depending on the grade of establishment, we will be talking of establishing neologisms or established neologisms. In this paper, in this research, what we tried is to show how much progress the different peninsular Spanish pandemic neologism detected by the Barcelona neology have made in the neological process. So our corpus obtained manually and automatically, as we said before, it is composed by 2009 COVID-19 neologisms. We have compared our database, the database from the Observatorio de Barcelona PubNeo, but we also have compared results in Factiva, the biggest database, one of the world's biggest databases. So in this chart, what we can observe is how the frequency of the words is even negligible. It's quite non-existent until the pandemic comes. For example, here in the document, in this chart, we can see post-pandemia or desconfinamiento, or some words such as nueva normalidad, which is the red one, that acquire some frequency and some relevancy during the pandemic. But in order to monitor the evolution of the mentioned word, what we have produced a normalized chart using the logarithm function. We intend to compress the scale and the magnitudes to study and try to analyze the magnitude of changes in a space where we try to minimize variation to make all units comparable. So this way, we can isolate some phenomena which would otherwise go unnoticed in the previous chart. For example, the emergence of new words during the COVID pandemic, the instability of occasionalisms, or the predestination to drop, like some words show, such as COVID itself, in absence of previous data. We also see in this chart the words such as colonial, emergency, words, the downward trends, in words such as reconfinamiento, COVID, or the stability of some syntagmatic components, such as respirador mecánico, nueva normalidad, or presión sanitaria. Based on these results, we divided the analysis into different groups. We divided in 6 different groups, depending on the frequency on Factiva database and also on PubNeo database. And we have from 1, the less frequent neologisms, and from 6, the most frequent one. But also, we wanted to point if they were recent or not, if they were existent before the pandemic. So we have considered the 2020 and 2021, if they just existed this year, we have considered them new neologisms, as we can see here in the second table. The earlier neologisms, the new ones, and the total. For the analysis, we took our corpus of pandemic neologisms organized into these different groups, and also we try to observe some trends for analyzing the dictionarization on the mechanisms, and if the dictionarization of these words has something related to the mechanisms. And yes, we cannot pretend to obtain some conclusion from this corpus of 2009 units, but we can see some trends, as we were saying before, not in the first 5 groups, but we can see, for example, in the less frequency groups, some processes such as neoclassical compounding or blending, like the most frequent groups. We can see also prefixation in the middle frequency groups, such as the big group of formation of neologisms, and we can see in the other one, we can see the high frequency neologism group. We can see such as syntagmatic or compounding. And for us, we all part of these groups of neologisms of frequency, we have obtained 3 dictionarization groups. The less frequent we call non-dictionarizable neologisms, then the neologisms in the antechamber of dictionarization, and then the dictionarizable neologisms that we will present right now. About the non-dictionarizable neologisms, in the main, the metaphor of war has been used to frame the discourse around the crisis caused by COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of words were related to this word metaphor. But also we found some humor and criticisms in the treatment of some words and in the use of some words for the non-dictionarizable neologisms. We can point that they account almost a quarter of the total of number of neologisms in our corpus. And we can find here in these 2 groups, that in this group of non-dictionarizable occasionalism neologisms, we can find the pure occasionalisms, units that were used just one single time for one single occasion, but also we have what we call disseminated occasionalisms. Occasionalisms that can get, due to the media or social media, they get a little bit more of representation, but they are insignificant, and they are not pretending to be established in use. That's why we call it the disseminated occasionalism. The formation of this word normally, or the big concentration, are neoclassical compounding, because they can be serious and specialized result as a playfulness mechanism, but also blending because of its transgressive character. Inside this blending mechanism, we see that corona is used in most of the processes, and we can, about the neological process, we can affirm that the neological process is not initiated. And as it is not initiated, we can maybe ask, are they considered neologisms? Are they not? It is a question and it is a debate, but it is already present in the current literature. About the neologisms in the antechamber of dictionarization, we will be talking about them from 3 points of view, such as Smith. We will be presenting the institutionalization. It is the most numerous group of our corpus. The neological process have clearly begun, but they have not completed it. And what about this social institutionalization? Well, when we talk about social institutionalization, it is certainly underway, but most have not been around long enough, as only a quarter of these neologisms had been documented previously. In this case, they are non-neological units in a specialized use, and the novelty lies in their spread to general use, such as afitromicina, apoyo respiratorio, or presymptomatico, or pluripatología. And also, we find in this group the ephemeral neologisms, the neologisms that have abandoned the neological process, such as covidiota, balconero, or telecolegial, to mention a few, that may disappear from use before they become stable in use. About the lexicalization of these words, lexicalization is a process of linguistic fixation of a new word's formal and semantic aspect, and thus it acquires a more precise meaning and a less variable form. We can affirm that the process is initiated with the first occurrence of a neologism, but it does not appear to have been completed in some of the examples making up the block of these neologisms. We have seen, for example, in the table 4, the neologism distancia social that coexists along a diverse range of forms that show different degrees of social institutionalizations, but these variants display the most defining semantic features of the concept, and together shows that there has not been yet any formal fixation to some extent lexicalization entails. About the hypostatization, when a speaker is faced with a new word, it analyzes the morphological constituents. The more transparent and less ambiguous, the most easier will be the hypostatization. Some of the neologisms in the block are at an advanced level of hypostatization, such as mascarilla higiénica, post-confinamiento, anti-mascarillas, etc. But others are not because of the specialized, because they are specialized units, such as gerontophobia, dexamethazones, etc. It is not time yet for them to enter the dictionary because we will need to see how the pandemic evolves in order to see how the establishment will be. And those neologisms that succeed in completing the process and the dictionary, then they will face the criteria of the proper dictionary, in this case, the Diccionario de la Real Lengua de la Academia Española. But what about the derivative series? We will be talking about the derivative series with the dictionary-able neologisms, which are the last group that we will be presenting today. It is one of the most frequent, they are the most frequent and more dictionary-able neologisms. The criteria of dictionarization are already discussed, and they accomplish a lot of them. The frequency criteria, the documentation criteria, and some of the textual spread, and some of the dictionarization criteria, they accomplish all of them. They have been, for example, present in the Diccionario del COVID-19 by Tremedica, and these are the 14 neologisms included in the latest update of the Real Academia de la Lengua Española. And we can point some phenomena happening here, something like, for example, in cuarentenear, which belongs to one of our less frequency neologism group. But we thought that in this inclusion, we wanted to represent some of the varieties of the Spanish language, but also, for example, we have some like teletrabajador and teletrabajo proceeding to this kind of derivative series, but we have not the verb teletrabajar, for example. We have words such as desconfinamiento, desconfinar, including that, and they were present in the dictionary, the words confinamiento or confinar, but we don't have some other words such as pre-confinamiento, pre-desconfinamiento, or other words belonging to this derivational series.
Pedro, there's only 1 minute left. Okay.
Yeah, just a conclusion. And about the point of, we wanted to present this approach by Kerremans, that Kerremans said that the neologisms are something like casting show winners. Some of them acquire some fame, some of them acquire some, then leave it. And we think that it is one of the most, for us, we want this to be studied as well. And the most dictionary-able neologisms are those with 13 characteristics, yet reality has shown us time and again that many of these neologisms that fulfill those seemingly essential characteristics may become stable in use, but others that fulfill them may not. So thank you very much, and sorry for this time that I've been talking in plus.